me right now to go ahead and start recording. And with that, I think we're ready to roll. So Ben, I will turn it over to you. Ben Cagle, Principal of Cagle Consulting Partners. Thanks again.
That's great. Thanks again. And Karen, thanks for hosting and thanks for getting this group together. And again, to old friends and new friends, thanks for joining. Hopefully this, I think it's going to be a very good conversation based on who's joining later on. So if you're like me, you're already looking around at the other participants and you're saying, okay, who's whom on the Zoom here? Who's actually attending this? So I thought I would do a little homework for you. And this is a perfect mix of the community and the ecosystem that I think Karen and then Dale Sizemore at Tech Alpharetta have actually helped build. And I think it's also where Cagle Consulting Partners, where we're targeting. So we do have some global enterprise companies represented. You see ADP, HP Enterprise, Hitachi, Merck, SAP, and I think a few others will be joining later. In terms of mid-sized companies, you know, maybe 5 to 150, 5 to 250 million that sell into enterprise or sell to other smaller mid-sized businesses. We have software development, IT staffing, consulting, technology, software, you know, application companies, startups, and, you know, in the community of Tech Alpharetta, some other startups as well, and even some investors are jumping on too. So this is the ecosystem around technology, innovation that that Tech Alpharetta gets together, and it's also where Cagle Consulting Partners focuses. So again, welcome to all of you, and this is who else is in your peer group here participating. We have about a 45-minute or so session here, so I'm going to move really quick. 3 slides of unadulterated self-promotion, quick intro on me. I want to share with you how to think like an executive in crisis mode. And I'm not all the end-all be-all, but I've lived this and I'm actually seeing this. I think there's 3 crisis phases that you can actually plot your customers into. And then there's some decision filters that executives use, especially in this crisis, that I just want to make you aware of. So let's think like an executive, outside in type selling. Then let's get into your sales mindset and tactics. And for many of you, this will be a checklist of how do you gain mind share with an executive in crisis. You know, everyone's gone virtual now with how you interact with your customers. So what are some of the Zoom basics? And then I'll give you just the key takeaways if you remember nothing else, 4 things just to keep top of mind. What I'd like to do, if we can, is have about 20 minutes or so for discussion. So I want to hear your war stories out there in terms of your customers in crisis. What are your challenges? If you have questions, or quite frankly, if you find something that's working, you know, as a best practice, let's share this. So let's have an idea exchange toward the end. So Karen, I will ask if anyone has a question during the first, let's say, you know, first or second session, ping Karen. And Karen, feel free to interrupt. And then we want a free-for-all in the last 20 minutes or so. If you want to come off mute, interact, ask other participants questions, those kinds of things, we can certainly do that. Okay? Hopefully that sounds like a plan to you. So let's get into shameless self-promotion. Cagle Consulting Partners, we solve 3 problems for our customers. And I'll talk about who our customers are on the next slide. We help you accelerate revenue growth for technology or professional services firms, businesses of all types. We help you innovate solutions. So a lot of how do you solve a business problem with your service or your technology or other offerings. We work with leaders to get that message across and get to market. And then we help scale organizations. So again, I've run different kinds of organizations. So you can see whether it's a bootstrap startup up to a global enterprise, that's great. And just mirroring what Karen said, if you could mute your mic, if you could, that would be very helpful for everyone participating. Quite frankly, we have clients on 3 different levels. So I do enterprise sales training literally globally for Cisco, IBM, SAS, and Genpact right now. Also, I do one-on-one or team account planning. How do you sell into other global enterprises literally around the world on 6 continents and in multiple industries, everything from healthcare to pharma, manufacturing, fintech. Majority of my with mid-sized executive teams in technology and professional services. You can see the different types of accounts and services. And again, some of those clients are actually on this call. Thanks for joining. And also, I like to work with tech startups, everything from artificial intelligence, cybersecurity with Laura Wysong, who's on the phone here, Cyber Hub Academy, capital markets, data, anything around data, IoT. I like to do that, to help them get into market, but more importantly, a lot of the global enterprises want to know what's happening in the innovation centers like Tech Alpharetta. So it's like a connect the dots thing as well. So we play on 3 different levels, and I think the participants today actually mirror that. So hopefully the messages will resonate for you. We cover all kinds of, when you think about your overall go-to-market, again, sometimes we do sales coaching, sales management, account management, that's more at the enterprise level. But for your mid-size and small firms, we help you put all this package together. All these elements have to come together to drive your revenue agenda. And basically, we use this framework and some other things as well. And just briefly about myself, there's really been, let's say, 4 chapters to my career. I came out of industry where I was like, you know, call me a division president. I ran about a $500 million division, global customers, did sales and operations, and then got into global consulting. So literally traveling the world, dealing with large enterprises as a team. I was EDS, it's now HP Enterprise. So I was there for a while, and then CSC, Computer Sciences Corporation, was a consultant there, and consulting leader. And then I've actually run different sized companies, and you can see the P&L basis here, data analytics companies, professional services companies. So the story I'm going to tell you is from this 3rd chapter of my career. It is when I was running a publicly traded, NASDAQ traded data analytics firm. We were going into the Great Recession of 2007, 8, and 9. Now, it's not quite as extensive in terms of the overall social impact, but I can guarantee you the business impact in terms of loss of shareholder value, revenue, having to just call, just say, oh, shoot, what are we going to do now due to what's happening in our customers? All those elements came into play, and that's going to be where we spend most of our time. So thank you for that commercial. Let's get into that situation. So again, this is 2007, 8, 9 is when I was leading the U.S. division of a publicly traded NASDAQ company. It had a history of mergers and acquisitions. So this is a roll-up company, and it didn't have that many standard processes or technologies, so you can imagine that. The good news is we had major global customers like Walmart, Kroger, Neiman Marcus, all kinds of retailers, manufacturers like GM, and even aerospace and defense and Boeing. We had a great marquee customers. My role, again, I was accountable for about 70% of the revenue of this firm. I had 23 locations reporting to me, including a couple of in India, across North America. I was accountable for growth, the new solutions, the new markets, and global marketing. So that's what I got into. So as I entered this role, I said, okay, this is going to be, a revenue flat to declining situation, a turnaround situation. We had heavy debt, so I was going to have to look at cash flow anyway. So it's like, okay, I went in heads up. But more importantly, when the recession hit, we figured out we were about 14 weeks away from not making payroll. So like Karen and Dale, we were talking earlier as the call was getting going. Once you live through some of these war stories, you don't forget it, and you're actually scarred. And I think that's when my hair started to turn gray. So think about a turnaround situation and then it being exacerbated by the economy coming on. So these are the 3 phases of crisis leadership, and I'm seeing the same trends today. So I'd just like to give this context for you. We're going to unpack all of these in more detail. And again, if you like these slides or anything else, my email will be at the end. We'll put my email up at the end, or hit me up on LinkedIn, and I can give you these frameworks we go through. But basically, phase 1 is in triage. This is short term. Hey, let's save the patient. What's going on? What moves can we make now? What's important? And most of your customers are in phase 1. However, I'm seeing a lot of your customers or different industries moving into phase 2. Either they're recovering or they're not recovering. And again, it depends on the industry. And what I called it was we had to bet the company. We had to come up with a bet the company plan in phase 2. Some of your customers may not be that severe, but yet again, they may be. And again, this is at the global enterprise, the mid-sized companies, as well as small companies. If you're selling to entrepreneurs, they may be in these same phases. You'll see some of the common attributes. And don't forget about the 3rd phase. And this is where we'll talk about the timing and when do you start selling what solution. The 3rd phase is the mission critical growth phase, because you cannot save yourself to a future. Eventually, every leader has to come up with, okay, we're here now, how are we going to grow? So those are the 3 phases we're into. So let's look at, this is an eye chart, so I apologize. And again, you can get a copy of this later. But I want you to be aware and start thinking about the conversations you're having with your customers. So phase 1 is in triage. And I thought about this as, hey, I just got to save the patient and don't have to do anything drastic. So you kill the patient, you kill the business. but you have to quickly assess and act. You've got imperfect information. You've got an extended decision timeline. You try to keep your options open. Don't paint yourself in a corner. And you've got to communicate to all the stakeholders. And typically this runs about 1 to 4 months once a crisis rears its head and you're heading into it. And I think, again, we've been in this mode now anywhere from 2 to 4 to 5 months, depending on it. So we're at this inflection point. You're looking at contingency plans, and this is where leadership is working Saturdays and Sundays. This is where you come in, you log on at 6, you log off at 8 or 9 at night. You're working different scenarios and assumptions while you're implementing your short-term triage plan. So think about, again, phase 1 is what? Your furloughs, executive compensation cuts, maybe you're cutting the hours of your operations. You're doing everything you can to conserve cash flow and understand what's going on in your customers because you don't know what's coming. All right, let's talk phase 2. This is when reality sets in. Say we cannot maintain this temporary status. And Delta Airlines is unfortunately entering phase 2. They announced furloughs and executive compensation, but they just announced, hey, executive buyouts, early retirement. So you can see the dominoes starting to line up that Delta's saying, hey, look, this current state we're in is not sustainable. You're looking as a leader to confirm assumptions. You're looking at market conditions. You're looking at compliance checklists. So when I had to do a major reduction in force, a major headcount reduction, are we quite frankly, laying off too many seniors? Are we in compliance with, male, female type things? What are our contract obligations? What's third party? So you're confirming your market assumptions outside in. What's the competition doing? What are our customers doing? What are our important vendors doing? But you're also looking at regulatory compliance issues. So your customers are probably going through this right now. So in my case, we made the decision, being 14, I still have indigestion coming out of this. So we had to reduce 20% of the FTEs. We had to close 25% of the locations. And this was the hard time. We had to fire unprofitable customers. Strategically, long-term, they were going to be valuable, but I actually had to tell GM we didn't want their business anymore and a couple like that. So that's how drastic it was. And of course, we had to communicate. So this period lasted 3 to 6 months, but we made sense that once we planned and we thought through every scenario, we tried to be buttoned up as possible. We had to do a rapid implementation. So we tried to get everything done in 2 weeks. So you pull the Band-Aid off, you make it hurt, you get through it. It's very intense, but you do it for 2 weeks. The change management programs, by the time you transition employees and operations and leases and all that, takes anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. And our planning horizon, think about this with your customers. Our planning horizon, we had 3, 6, 9, 12, 18-month milestones that we thought about. What are success? And we had multiple dimensions of success. But eventually, again, I was brought on to grow the firm. And this is going to be another inflection point. I want you to think about your customers. Some are already coming out of it thinking growth. How do we actually take advantage of this, right? How do we don't let a good crisis go to waste? We've all heard that cliche. But you can't save your way to a future. So thinking about new growth options. Do we go into new markets with new solutions? Do we take new solutions to existing? So part of our strategy when I came in was we wanted to move into healthcare. So Larry, that's one reason I was asking about your healthcare, who you were targeting on the provider side. One of our solutions was we wanted to go into the federal sector contracting, and we wanted to go in CMS, the Center of Medicare Services, to actually do fraud detection and data analytics for them. So that was a key part of our strategy. And we were also looking for new channels, new partnerships, that kind of thing. The period here is about 6 to 24 months, but once we got our head, once we exited phase 2, we had to put points on the board. We had to basically get into revenue, generating revenue in a 6 to 9 month period. We could not have an 18-month sales cycle. We had to be very quick. So that also got us into triage in terms of what growth opportunities were realistic, which ones had we laid the foundation for, and which ones we could hit. So I will pause here and open it up. And Karen, either they can use the chat function, or I would love to hear 1 or 2 of your examples of where do you think your customers are right now. And again, it can be a large customer, a mid-sized, or a small customer. So I will open up the lines, or come off mute, or open the chat line, and let's hear 1 or 2 war stories. Would anyone like to share?
This is
You
Larry.
guys are quiet.
This is Larry.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, go for it, Larry.
First of all, I sell to doctors' offices, so the save the patient, don't kill the patient is a little bit.
I was thinking business, but yeah, you're right. In your case, it's literal, right?
You know, the medical practices are struggling, right? So some practices have closed their doors for a couple of weeks and can't open depending on their specialties. A lot of them have had to furlough, you know, a lot of them that rely on elective surgeries, like people that you think never had to worry about money, so to speak. And, you know, some of us might have a hard time feeling sympathy for them, but, you know, orthopedic surgeons, right? They make, you know, $350,000 or $500,000, but they're having to lay off everybody because they can't do elective surgeries, right? Because people just, it's one of the specialties where it's not necessary, you know, take 6 more Advil and delay your shoulder surgery or something. So a lot of different practices are struggling differently. And I've seen that a lot of them have a different outlook. Some specifically around telemedicine, some think that it's a temporary thing and they don't really want to do it. And they're just did something quick and dirty like a FaceTime or a Skype or a Zoom. And others think it's going to be here for a long time, so they want a more HIPAA compliant, more robust solution. So I've seen the gamut of practices that either can stay open because of the type of patients that they serve, or are really struggling more because the, you know, dermatology or something that's just more elective. And so, you know, us as patients, or we as patients, are choosing just to not go.
Yeah, and Larry, I appreciate you sharing that. And I've just noticed that here in Atlanta, Wellstar is one of our major healthcare provider, you know, hospital and physician networks. They just laid off, I think, what, 1,000 or so. So think about that. You always thought healthcare was one of the most secure, you know, careers, if you will. But they are literally, you know, they closed their practices, but now they may be moving in. Some of the practices may be moving into phase 2. You know, so Larry, we don't have to talk about it now, but they may be, you know, selling their practice to the hospital networks. They may be consolidating offices with other practitioners. There's going to be major change here. So thinking about that change as they go into phase 2, saying either we think it will recover and we'll be back in 3 or 4 months and it was just a cash flow issue, or foundationally as healthcare changed, you know, for the next 6 to 18 months, they're going to have to do something differently. So they may be moving into phase 2. So thanks for sharing that, Larry, about healthcare providers. How about one more example from any industry, fintech, manufacturing, you know, other industries that you've seen that you think they're kind of maybe at an inflection point or moving through these phases? Anyone else?
Hey, Ben, it's Elaine.
Yeah, Ed, good to talk to you again. Thanks for joining.
Yeah.
What are you thinking here?
So as a SaaS software provider for a product that is mostly discretionary, the market just disappeared, right? All of a sudden, nobody's got discretionary money for a product they didn't know they needed. But we've had a few fall into our laps where they have a COVID budget, which kind of blew us away. You know, that they said, hey, we've got this COVID budget. We need to know what's going on with the employees. Does your product do that? And so those same customers, if I would have called them 6 months ago or 2 months ago, they would have not been interested at all anyways, but now they've fallen into a potential market for us.
No, that's great. And Ed, it was great working with you earlier this year, and I'm glad you were able to make that pivot. But yeah, and like you said, Ed, the previous barriers they talked about in terms of, you know, monitoring employees' activities to see what, you know, if they're engaged or how they're feeling emotionally about their job. Are they feeling stressed? That was almost taboo with some industries, January, February when we were talking, but now you're right, just an inflection point. So I'm glad you pivoted, and again, great to talk to you, and thanks for sharing. All right, but now you're getting it too, that, you know, rethinking what's going on. So again, you think about what do we learn from Ed and Larry's, you know, situation, that some trends like telemedicine, it was like a slow growth trend, but now it's accelerated because people have to think about delivering medicine and patient care in a different manner. Same thing with Ed, right? People now need to know, since their employees are remotely scattered, what is their temperature? Are they engaged? How are they feeling emotionally? So look for those inflection points as well. Another example is retail, right? The Amazon factor was already impacting retail because, you know, the consumer wanted anything they wanted within eventually 30 minutes, believe it or not. That's the Amazon window. But look at what's happened to delivery and pickup, right? So that was already happening in retail, that shift to online, omni-channel, luxury department stores were disappearing. And this change just accelerated that. Same thing with manufacturing and some others as well. So think about those inflection points. And again, think about where your customer is, and are they going to win in phase 2, or do they have a new reality of, this is our revenue, we're going to take some tough decisions? And just be aware of that. The other thing is, if you're selling more of a growth-oriented solution where it's about value creation or growth, don't wait till phase 3 starts. Start seeding in some of your ideas now, and I'll talk basically on that as well.
Hey, Ben, can I interrupt for a sec? Hey.
Yeah, sure.
There's also a question that came in through the chat. What would you suggest for a startup seeking to offer a product that would help a B2B client through the crisis?
Well, again, it depends on the phase, right? So if you're a startup and it's all about cost reduction, if it's all about efficiency and it can be implemented in 3 months or less, and there's immediate ROI, return on investment, or cash impact, I think you should actually go right at the COO. And I'm actually going to talk to how startups can get mind share here in a minute. So hold that thought again, Karen, or whoever asked that question, and come back and make sure I answered it, okay, going forward. Any other questions, Karen? Okay, we're going to keep moving. We're going to keep moving so we get through this. So the other thing is, the second thing about thinking like your customer, literally, I can see in the communications and some people I've talked to, and again, my own experience is you have a filter, an order that you have to worry about. So number one in triage phase, hey, employee safety and well-being. I have zero tolerance for anything that's going to impact the safety of my employees or my customers if my people engage with them, right? And now they're even getting into physical and mental health concerns in some of the leading firms. So employee safety, impact to my customers, are we going to have revenue coming in or not? Disruption to supply chains. Again, even in pharmaceutical, they were having difficulty getting primary ingredients out of China, as we know, and India as well. So there's even there was high demand for vaccines, the supply chain disruption got in the way. Obviously, financial impacts to cash flow, maintaining operations, closing offices we talked about, outsourcing non-core, even impact to society and communities, that was considered as well. And again, all across all of these dimensions were short-term and mid-term contingencies. So that is where we're thinking like the customers. So I thought back and said, okay, when I was in this crisis mode, I was literally managing my calendar for about 3 months on a 15-minute windows. My admin was like air traffic controller because we had to quickly assess. I had a lot of people to communicate with, and we had to make decisions and then implement our plans. So my mind, what I would advise sales execs to do is for every interaction with your customer, think about how you can provide value in terms of, hey, and I'll talk about what some of those values are for me, those value areas, but just have that mindset is, I don't need to waste this person's time unless they just need a friendly voice to, de-stress with, but provide value at every interaction. Respect my time. Again, I've got to act quick, get to the point, get on it. Be relevant. Think about my strategies, my initiatives, my financial performance and pressure. With Cisco and IBM and the sessions we've been having the last really 6 weeks, it's all about understanding strategy, initiatives, what's going on, how are their strategies changing, their customers changing. And then I work with a company called Finlistics. We actually look at their financial performance and what pressures they're under so we can go in with a value proposition that hits it. Also, if you're thinking about reaching out to your customers or executives, connect the dots on a business case. So startup, if you think you've got a cost-saving solution that is very relevant to what's going on and the trends going on and what that company, that executive is experiencing, you can go right in saying, look, I think I can drop 10% of your SG&A costs like within 3 months. Go in with that, not what you do. Go in with the value and the problem you're solving, and go in with that message. And I'll talk to you on the right side about how to get that message in. Talk about if you've got insights to me. So I had several of my friends that were sales reps for technology companies that were saying, hey, Ben, I know you don't have time. Here's what's going on with customers. Here's what the competition's doing. Here's how technology is doing. So my business development community actually acted as my market sensing, my market sensors out there. It was like IoT on steroids. All my friends were sending me, hey, do you know about this? You may have already heard it, but if you haven't, here's what's going on. Huge value. The other thing is connect the dots to my priorities. A lot of people knew my organization, So they were able to say, hey, look, one side of the organization is working on this, the other side doesn't know about it. You better make sure you guys are coordinated. So you actually helped me be more effective in my organization. Thinking about implementation, best practices. So all of these things are ways you can create value for that executive. Again, a quick ping, a quick email, a quick message to their admin, or coming in through one of the direct reports just to get the message in. That would be, that was very helpful. Tell me something I don't know, or tell me something I need to know. I had this question come up with another session I was giving. One company that actually sold to larger companies, they go, listen, we're in crisis. Should we share that with our customers? I said, shoot, yeah, you should share it. If you're mission critical, I wanted to know how you guys are doing to see if I could help you out, because I was depending on you as a vendor. So think about, if you're mission critical, you're a secondary vendor. If you're mission critical, those executives and those customers want to hear from you. So again, communicate through my admin, just leave a quick message, get to the point. Here's the problem. Here's what I think, Ben. You want us to talk about it, or what do you want us to do? And literally my admin was maintaining relationships because I didn't have time to do that. Work through a team or other members. This is something that if JD is on, JD Dickinson, he sells software development services. I'll come back to you in a minute, JD, if you're on. He actually reinforced this, that ask for 20 minutes, ask for 15 minutes. That way I'll have time to grab a coffee or take a restroom break because I'm so busy. But if you've got a 20-minute request, it's like, that's odd. What does he have to say? And, what's the value proposition? Do the work for me, and, don't expect me to connect the dots. I'm busy. Say, hey, Ben, I think this is how it happens, or dear customer, this is how I think you're doing. I think you're doing these 3 things. Here's how we fit, and here's the value in solving that problem. So start again, outside in, get to the point, connect the dots, and lead the witness. Don't expect me to, don't start, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Guess you're under stress. Don't have time for small talk. Get to the point and take me where you want to take me to add value around every interaction. So those are some of the basic tactics. In terms of the basics, in terms of remember the basics, respect time. And again, this has been something, 20-minute, 40-minute requests are unusual, but it also says, hey, look, we're not going to waste your time. We're that precise, we're that organized, we're that buttoned up. Establish the goals, get to the point, be bold, summarize, prepare. Key thing here is also, I think a key thing is, I call it running into the ambush. If you've got a solution, or if you've got an idea that you want your customer to implement, whether it's phase 1, 2, or 3, you know what the objections are going to be. Go ahead and address those up front. Don't wait on your customer to ask you, saying, oh, I hope they don't ask it. Just come forward with it. The respect level will go up, the trust level will go up, and just run into those ambushes around that. And again, be very specific. So here are the key takeaways, and I'd like to open up. I think, Karen, we have, 10 or 15 minutes for some examples or questions. Key takeaway here is, put yourself, if you remember nothing else, put yourself in the place of the customer. Think, literally mentally parachute yourself into that chair. WWYD, what would you do in that situation? And problem solve, and then offer solutions and create value with your customers, your customers or clients. Think about the key industry trends and which ones, like Larry said, in healthcare, are going to accelerate or change rapidly that your customers are going to have to respond to, or quite frankly, you'll have to respond to. And think about new ways to create value. Watch for the inflection point on the 3 phases, right? Again, I think most industries are going from triage phase 1 into, I have to make permanent decisions here that are going to materially and foundationally impact the business. So think about those temporary decisions. And I gave you that example from Delta, right? We're talking furloughs and temporary, and people could take time off if they wanted to. Some pay cuts, executive. Now we're moving into payouts and possibly reduction in force, RIFs. All right. The other inflection point are executive departures or senior level hires. So that shows you that either you're going into phase 2 or going into phase 3 if there are a lot of executive departures because they're changing their strategy. Sometimes these, they may go through phase 2 in 2 weeks and get right to growth in some industries. Others, they may be in phase 2 for the remainder of this year and the first quarter or 2 of next year before they hit their growth agenda. Don't wait to the inflection points. If you've got a growth strategy for phase 3, start seeding that, start planting the seeds now. They may not have to have time to deal with you, but they'll be thinking about your solution or bringing you in in phase, while they're in phase 2, planning for getting ready for phase 3. So be thinking about the timing of your solution. Don't wait till they're already in the next phase. So again, if you have a customer in triage and you've got a major foundational cost step change improvement, start selling that now. And then again, sales approach, always add value, sell ahead of the phase, stay ahead of the game. So those are my prepared remarks. Thanks for the guys, Ed and Larry, for jumping in. But what I'd like to do is open this up to any questions, or if you have a build to say, hey, Ben, yeah, you talked about that, but let's talk about this as well. Or if you have a client situation, that'd be fantastic. So any questions or comments now as we kind of open it up? Comments?
Ben, this is Tom Valentine. Great material, as always. You would ask a little bit, being in the logistics sector, it's been crazy over these last few months. A lot of changes going on. But to your point earlier, which is, finding the opportunity and to bring value to a customer, we're seeing actually a lot of low-hanging fruit opportunities in regards to contract optimization. The C-level suite understands that, freight expense and cost of logistics is a direct expense to the bottom line, right? So every dollar they can save in that area brings value to the company and, again, to the cash flow side of the equation. So we're seeing a lot of opportunities in simple contract optimization, which, to your point, is typically a 90-day or less return. And the carriers nowadays are pretty open, considering the environment. We do see companies that are starting to get back to work here in May throughout the U.S. So it's starting to gear up a little bit, but it's still not there because a lot of the CDC regulations and personal space processes that are being put in place. So there's a lot of changes happening on the manufacturing and warehouse environment.
Yep.
We put together some supply chain risk assessment. A lot of people didn't even know what supply chain meant. Now they're feeling it and understanding it, right? So
yep.
they're actually addressing those, and the C-suite is actually starting to take action in the supply chain side. So we're seeing a lot of opportunity in those areas. And then, of course, what we see in what you would refer to as your third phase, we're going to anticipate seeing opportunities come down the pike in reshoring, nearshoring, because of the China situation on the supply chain side.
No, Tom, I appreciate that. For those of us that don't work on a daily basis, in supply chain logistics, what's the biggest surprise that people don't know or understand right now? That we'd either be surprised or just, a nuance about what's really going on with logistics.
Just one, huh? Yeah.
I'll get back to you on that one. I'll put you on the spot.
Yeah,
so, obviously
okay.
Demand is down. No, demand is down. Regulations are going on, but any big trend that's not getting much press or people don't think about that you'd like to share. I love when you and I play off each other, it's always interesting. I always learn something from you.
Sure. So what you're seeing is that big shift towards. I mean, a lot of companies were headed. You indicated a little bit at the beginning about the Amazon effect. There were a lot of manufacturers that were typically set up to go B2B traditionally, but demand is being driven by the consumer. So there's a lot of B2C, and that's been driven to what we call a mode shift, right? So getting away more from the truckload down to the final mile. So really, a lot of people, as consumers, we just want to go to Amazon or go to our online, and we want it to be there in the next day or two, right? Well, no one ever asked, well, how does that happen? Well, for that to happen, you have to have product near the region or location so that you can have that delivery point. A lot of companies are not set up to do that. Just for example, even some of the large ones, there's Home Depot and Procter & Gamble are spending, for their long 3 to 5 year plan. I know Home Depot's like 179 micro warehouses throughout the U.S. with the end goal of being, we want to be able to get same day product on same day order to all of our customer reach throughout North America. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm sorry. That transformation Home Depot is going from thinking about their big box retail sites as maybe a redistribution center or a distribution center and micro and getting everything to, same day to their customers. Big products, a major transformation, right? No, that's perfect. Tom, that's exactly what I was looking for. That's great, man. Thanks for sharing. What about another example from another industry, either the change you're seeing or how you've been effective? JD, are you on? JD Dickinson?
Nope. Ben, there is
JD,
one comment.
JD?
One comment here.
Ben, yeah, I had a,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, go ahead,
observation and,
go ahead, Tariq, and then Karen. Yeah, go ahead.
So one thing due to this changing environment, right? I'm seeing a lot of impact on interaction, the physical interaction, and I'm seeing a demand for autonomous capabilities. Like drones would be a good example. At the same time, I know there are a lot of regulations about usage of drones and the proximity issues. So I'm not sure how the demand is going to drive any changes to the regulations around usage of drones and closeness to physical objects. So this I'm seeing the demand. I'm not sure how regulations are going to change or going to put a roadblock in terms of adoption of this technology. So
there's several things. Thanks, Tariq, and again, enjoyed our conversations together. Yeah, with drones and anything like that, we're seeing an acceleration. So Brittany Stovall, I mentioned Brittany earlier, she actually provides services to automotive manufacturing facilities. She puts her people in those facilities to inspect product, make sure product flow is going, those kinds of things. And even she's saying, okay, now I've got to get my people on site. They have to social distance. They have to wear the safety wear. And now automotive manufacturers are saying, what kind of IoT information or Internet of Things wearables can I implement to make sure that I can track who's been exposed to who, right? Those kinds of things. So just like Ed talked about, privacy concerns are going down because safety concerns are going up. So with drones, you think about the use case. Where is the private? If it's privacy or safety or FAA regulations are getting in the way. Do the safety concerns for monitoring crowds and disbursements and social distancing outweigh the regulations? And we're seeing a lot of inflection points there. So Tariq, thanks for bringing up. That's great. How about another example quickly as we have just a few more minutes together? Another industry or, again, maybe a customer problem, or you'd like to brainstorm with this group how you actually get FaceTime or mind share with one of your customers. Any ideas or questions?
Well, Ben, since you brought me up.
Yeah, Britt.
Hi, guys. I think you're absolutely right. Safety is probably the ultimate concern for all of our customers. How do you track outside vendors coming into your facility and kind of map where they are throughout their process and through ours? Also, automotive is, as we all know, automotive has been a revolving door for centuries, so probably. One of the things we're seeing that our customers are having issues with was ramp up. Are people going to buy cars with 30 million people not working? That has been the question on the table for the last 3 months going ongoing. We know plants are going to open. We know production is going to happen. But what does that production number look like? Is the run going to be the typical 1,200 vehicles a day? Or are we dropping those down to 300-500 vehicles a day, which impacts lots of businesses across the board? I don't think people realize how much it impacts the entire world, not just the United States. So what does that reflection look like for me as a vendor in the supply chain for them? Also, what does that look like for my customers? How do my customers stay healthy? Do we need to start weaning out some of the customers that will not survive this and be profitable in 6 months? And you can kind of tell which ones are struggling through it now and which ones will survive through it later. So yeah, it's definitely been a whole culture shock to everyone, especially in the automotive manufacturing. We always know automotive will at some point start running, but we get kind of concerned when we don't know what they're running.
Yeah, exactly. And what I'm watching for with you, Brett, is that, is phase 2, right? That mindset is the current state not sustainable. So will they start to, as they did in the past, right? In the last downturn, in the Great Recession, will they start to consolidate operations, reduce capacity, idle capacity, and just focus that on a few key plants based on demand. So yeah, I'm watching with you with those inflection points and what's going on. But no, great comments. Thank you so much for sharing. Always good to talk to you. What about somebody else? Another example quickly as we think about this. Any customer problems or ideas or just what's going on in the industry to share with the group just for,
hey Ben, this is Jason.
Good to know. Yeah, Jason.
I got one. So we have we're talking about automotive here. So one of our clients is a large automotive manufacturer, and we're a consulting company, so we have people there. One of the things we've had to do is cut costs by 20%. So the client came to us and said, look, it's a cash flow problem, right? People aren't buying cars, and we have to get our cash flow under control. So one of the things they look to for us is to try to cut costs by 20%. So we ended up having to cut our staff there, the billable hours, by 20%. So one recommendation, just as you're working with clients, is to think about their cash flow concerns, which we're all doing, but how do you act upon that? And if there's any way to help them with their cash flow problems, you may have to take a temporary hit, but it's better than being cut out of the equation altogether. So we've had to adapt a little bit, at least for the next 3 months, to say, look, we'll cut our billable hours by 20% to try to help you with your cash flow issues. And that's kept us in the game, basically, at this client.
Yeah, and Jason, you and I haven't, thanks for sharing, by the way, I appreciate it. We haven't caught up in a few weeks, but what I'm also hearing is that either with some professional services, not always, if you could sell on value about the strategic value of the project, tough in this environment when you're dealing with strategic sourcing. Also taking on additional scope, so keep your same resources, just take on additional scope, kind of upsell it versus diminish it. But you're right, and definitely in phase one, the mindset is, cost, you got to reduce your fee to stay alive. But maybe as they're moving into phase two, about if they start to consolidate, it's not sustainable going forward. Again, taking on more work, same cost structure or absolute cost might be, I'm not saying that it might be a solution as well. I'm sure you brainstormed every scenario around that. No, but thanks for sharing. I appreciate that. How about Karen? How are we doing on time or questions online? Are we okay on time for another few minutes? Or
yeah, we've got just a couple minutes. There was a comment online from a logistics standpoint. One logistics surprise they found was that they couldn't find a webcam, which I can say I've experienced the same thing when I looked for one for Tech Alpharetta. There were no webcams to be found online, not within an affordable range.
Incredible. Yeah, it's amazing. It went from toilet paper to webcams, right, in terms of shortages. So.
Yeah, for sure.
Just ironic. You don't think about it, but to Tom Valentine's point, I think we're all thinking supply chain and logistics on mission critical, materials or pharmaceuticals and whatnot. It's amazing how, again, a shift like this impacts the strategy of the entire country, right? In addition to these global companies we're seeing. Well, great. How about one more question or just knowledge sharing? This is great. Thanks everyone for stepping up and sharing. How about one more example that people don't, live in day to day that you'd like to share with the group?
Hey, Ben, Ranjan Roy here.
Yeah, Ranjan.
Hey, Ben, so one of our customers, basically recently we were discussing regarding some upcoming projects for them. And as I'm from the strategic sourcing background, and one of the things which customers' procurement department will be looking minutely going forward while identifying the suppliers or shortlisting the suppliers, what is the strategy for the supplier to handle this type of pandemic situation? How they will handle if this type of COVID situation comes up in the future again, and how they will handle it. So based on that, one of the selection criteria will definitely be this going forward. So that's one of the areas which we are discussing with few clients, and everybody pointed out that we were not prepared for this COVID situation of the supply chain disruption which happened, and how we can minimize it and how we can keep this a strategy, because one of the checklists which we can have while we are identifying the suppliers going forward. So that's one thing which all the suppliers has to think through going forward. Yeah, that's what was one of my.
No, that is great. So those of you that do a lot of RFPs into state, local, state or federal, state, local, or you're doing it into the private sector, you're hearing that there's probably going to be a checkpoint, a checklist on what is your strategy, what's your contingency plan around that. That's a great awareness. I had not thought about that yet or heard about that, but I think definitely in phase 2, that's going to be a criteria going forward. So great insight, great knowledge share. I appreciate that.
Yeah, one more addition to that actually by Ben. Sorry to cut you off.
Yes.
So one more addition to that now, like today we are working on one proposal with customer, and in the proposal we are specifically adding some slide or one point that how we are prepared with this COVID-19. Like going forward, what will be strategy? Like as we are more into professional services and we are more into service offerings, so we are letting the customer, we're educating the client that, okay, even if you start the project during the COVID-19, this is how the strategy will be. And if the COVID is under control, when we identify a vaccine, hopefully soon, then what will the strategy after that? So customer is really prepared to know that, okay, if you deal with Trinamics, this is what exactly the strategy they will be applying right now. And once the COVID is done, this is how the phase 2 will be opening if they continue with the engagement with this. That's one thing which we are doing as well.
No, that's fantastic. And I think you're right. You know, understanding the customer strategy and understanding, you know, what their priorities are going forward. And quite frankly, what is their contingency plan for COVID, right? And then making sure you align with that. That's perfect. So, all right. Karen, anything else? Anything else on chat or anything else we need to be aware of as we start to wrap up here?
Yes, let's see. Yes, from Heather, says, we've reached out to customers to share insight on phase 1, what they may need to do to reconfigure their software to adapt to changes in production. And number 2, providing value. Remote work, their implementation methodology experts got together to retool their methodology and tools for Agile SDLC 100% remotely, and then shared that with their company clients who are also facing the same struggles. And then number 3, in phase 3, they're offering insights on how to become more agile, more innovative with things like new product offerings.
That's perfect. And I think that sounds like a great alignment. Again, you're creating value at each phase they're going through, right? And you're not waiting to the next phase to put forth you know, a proposal. That's the other thing I think also you hit on is that what we're seeing is, and when I'm talking to a lot of my friends, they're saying, you know what, the old objections, the old, hey, we can't do it that way now, have gone away. And people are thinking, we've got to think differently. You know, we couldn't, you know, previously you wouldn't have thought that 90% of employees could work remotely. Guess what? We're in that new norm now. And as usual with most phases, it'll swing back, you know, all these trends will swing back to some kind of equilibrium. But right now, if you sell a solution where they had objections in the past, now's the time to say, hey, look, those objections have gone away. This is a great time to implement. If you have value, you know, revenue increase or cost reduction, and it can be implemented either in a short-term phase, you know, standpoint or in a very phased approach where you can deliver value, cost reduction at different milestones. I think that's perfect. Great example. Thanks for sharing that. All right. Anything else, Karen, as we start to wrap up here? I know we had budgeted to 12:45. I want to respect everyone's time. But if we have 1 or 2 more, Karen, we can go, or if you care to wrap it up. So Karen, your call.
Okay, let me just read off this last comment, and then I think we'll go ahead and close out after that. Visibility to supply chain and supply chain risk assessment are becoming critical across all industry sectors.
Yeah, what I'm hearing, I agree, and definitely what Tom and some of the others have said is definitely coming in. So there's almost a, you know, and like Ranjan said, right, there's a new dimension to this going forward. There's going to be the COVID or the force majeure in all your contracts, right? All the acts of God, all those clauses that you didn't pay attention to in contracting is now there's going to be a criteria around pandemic and emergency crisis response. So I think that's going to be the new norm. Just like with 9/11, right? The way we flew before 9/11 and then the security protocols after 9/11, it changed the way. I think in all these industries, we're about to see in phase 2, there's going to be a new way to think, and it's going to be more regulations, more compliance, and different ways to interact. So I know that just some other factoids. I have some friends up in New York, JP Morgan Chase, they're not going back into their corporate headquarters with any employees until probably January. So the large companies that have zero risk for any kind of impact to their employees right now. So there's going to be some foundational changes in commercial real estate, industrial real estate. And I think in some of these manufacturers I'm hearing, I was talking to some people in Europe with, I won't say who it was with, but they're actually thinking about, again, global manufacturing, how they're going to consolidate that. And even with small manufacturers, I have one of my clients is a small business that they actually do the meal kits. What's happened is they were doing all the food prep themselves. So with the stay-at-home trend, their business has actually tripled. So they're delivering more meal kits. They compete with HelloFresh and Blue Apron and some of those. So we got them on the growth curve, which is great. But the fulfillment, he didn't have enough operations. But what he found is that a company in Athens that actually lost the Delta catering contract wants to take on his small business. So he's like reduced his cost by 30%, going with his food prep arm, and now he could scale his business the rest of the way without building, new capacity. So there's a lot of new opportunities if you think differently, and I think Heather and some of the others actually made those points. All right, Karen, well, listen, I'll end the program. Here's my email if you have any other ideas, if you have future ideas for seminars, if I can help you, if you want copies of the frameworks, anything I can do to create value for you, as hopefully you're going in from phase 2 to phase 3, would be glad to do that and glad to have a conversation. So Karen, back to you. Thank you so much again for hosting.
Well, thanks so much, Ben. That was terrific. Really insightful, and I love all those practical tips you provided as well. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Since we've recorded this, we'll also be posting the presentation on our website by the end of this week at techalpharetta.com, where you can reference it there. And look for our next upcoming workshop focused on startups, on whether a startup should apply for Venture Atlanta, which by the way is going virtual this year. That's coming up June 3rd, our next virtual workshop, followed June 11th by our Tech CIO panel, which will also of course be virtual, that we're excited about. So you can check our website for more details, but thanks, it's great to see everybody here today. Thanks again, Ben.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for your contributions. Really enjoyed it. Hope it was valuable. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks
Thanks,
everyone.
Karen.
Thanks.